Thank you, Belen. Just a technical check. Tell me if you are are able to see the presentation slide.
Yes, we are. All
good. All good. All right then. So hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on Microsoft Defender for Cloud and its security posture risk level prioritization analysis. My name is Giulio Astori. I'm a principal program manager for Defender for Cloud. And then on today's agenda, we have the evolving cybersecurity landscape discussions. We're going to move into the nature of the cyber threats. We're going to cover the challenge of the cybersecurity, and then we're going to try to understand the limitation of the traditional security posture. Next, we'll see what is the need for contextualized risk evaluations, and we'll cover how the Microsoft Defender for Cloud helps to contextualize the risk evaluations. So without any further ado, let's dive right into the heart of today's discussion by starting with the evolving cybersecurity landscape. As we navigate through this area of transformations, our cybersecurity strategies must also evolve. The digital landscape is not what it was a decade ago. We are now dealing with an expanded attack surface that includes cloud environments, remote workforces, and plethora of cloud-native applications and APIs. Each of those elements introduce new vulnerabilities and potential entry points for cybercriminals. Attacks are becoming more sophisticated. Leveraging artificial intelligence and machine learning, they're able to bypass traditional security measures. It is basically a dynamic battleground where the stakes are continuously rising. The complexity of the modern IT environment means that the security teams are now responsible for safeguarding a much larger and more diverse set of resources. This diversities includes everything from on-premise servers, yes, we still have on-premise services, to the cloud-based applications and mobile devices. However, it's not just about the number of the devices or the breadth of the network covering those devices. The very nature of the cyber threats has evolved. Phishing, ransomware, and state-sponsored attacks are just the tip of the iceberg. Cyber criminals are constantly finding new ways to exploit vulnerability, steal data, and disrupt operations. The reality that we face is one of expanding attack surfaces. Every devices, every applications, and every piece of data connected to the internet becomes a potential entry point for cyber threats. The numbers are very much staggering. According to a recent report, cyber attacks are not only becoming more frequent, but also more sophisticated. As an organization, this puts us in a challenging position. Our security teams are the front line of the defense against those cyber threats. What are their tasks? Their tasks are to protect our networks and the data from the potential breaches. However, the complexity and the value of those tasks require to improve our organization postures and investigate potential incidents are growing exponentially. These can, unfortunately, lead to a very critical security risk, which is being overlooked or delayed, leaving the organization very much vulnerable to the cyber attacks. So why does this matter? Well, it matters because cybersecurity is not just about protecting the data. It's about safeguarding our way of life. In an age where digital transformation is important, it's pivotal, ensuring the security of our digital assets then becomes a paramount object. But how do we stand up to this challenge? How do we ensure our security teams are not overwhelmed but empowered to protect us effectively? The answer lies in not just understanding the threat, but in prioritizing our response to them. As we move to the next slides soon, we will explore how the traditional security posture has struggled to keep the pace with those changes and why a new approach is very much needed. An approach that doesn't just address the volume of the threats, but understand the context and the nuances of each, enabling us, the defender, to prioritize and respond more effectively. Let's take a closer look at the delimitations and set the stage for the next discussions on the contextual risk evaluation. So before we jump right into the core discussions, let's look first into the traditional ways how we have been trying to protect our digital space and why it is time for a change. Imagine locking every door of your house and the windows in the house by using the same type of a lock for each, regardless of how valuable the items are inside of each room. You will lock those rooms, those doors, and those windows using one single lock, the same lock over and over. This is like how traditional cybersecurity methods have approached for the past years, trying to protect the digital assets. In the past, security systems would assign a fixed severity level to each security issues. Think of it as giving every problem a label, such as high, medium, or low. Basically, a label based on how bad we thought it could be when first we discovered this vulnerabilities or the security issue. And once labeled, okay, everything with the same label, guess what? Was treated, was executed, was processed pretty much the same way. But here is where things all fall short. Not every issues pose the same risk to every organization. A vulnerability on a server that holds sensitive customer data is far more critical than the same vulnerability on a test server with the no real data. That's obviously very obvious, right? Yet, traditional methods might treat those two instances, two use case very much equally. Why? Because we're focusing on the problem label, not where it's happening or what is at stake. This approach, likely very much from the past, is like saying that all cars going over the speed limit are equally dangerous, regardless on whether they are on a crowded city street or an empty highway. It lacks basically the context, right? He doesn't consider how likely it is that something bad will happen, like an exploit happening, or how much damage could be done if it does. So the core of the issue is that cybersecurity is not just about checking box or following a one-size-fits-all checklist. It's about understanding the unique aspects of each threat and how it relates to your specific environment. It is recognizing that the severity of a threat is not just about the type of attack, but also where it's happening and what could be affected. As we've seen, And so far, and we discussed, the digital landscape is vast and varied nowadays. Labeling all threats the same, high, medium, or low, without actually considering their context, means that we might waste time and resources on minor issues while missing the big ones that could cause the real harm. In our next sections, in our next slides, we will explore a more effective approach to evaluating and addressing the cyber risk, an approach that considers the unique details of each threat. This is where the concept of contextual risk evaluation comes into play. It's a concept that will offer a smart way to prioritize and tackle the cybersecurity challenge. Now let's pivot to the crucial concept that is transforming how we are approaching cybersecurity, and that is the contextual risk analysis and evaluation. Think of it as getting to know someone rather than just reading their resume. It's about understanding the full picture. I'm keeping repeating pretty much the concept, all right? Not just the highlights. In the cybersecurity, such concept means looking behind the surface of the threat. Instead of asking, how bad is this vulnerability? We start asking more detailed questions like, how likely it is that someone will exploit this vulnerability? And if they do, how much damage could he cause? This approach is very much grounded in a simple but powerful formula, and we all should know this formula. The formula is risk equals the likelihood of something bad happening times the impact if it does happen. It's like assessing the risk of leaving your bike unlocked. The risk isn't just about the bike's value, it also considers how likely it is to be stolen based on where you are. Contextual risk evaluation dives deep into the specifics. He considered the criticality of the affected system. How important is the system to your operations? Are we talking about a server hosting your website landing page or a database containing all your customer information? He also weighs the likelihood of an exploit. Vulnerabilities, when contextualized, will show the likelihood of its exploitation, and even worse, the options to move laterally across the resources. By incorporating those details, we can prioritize our effort more effectively. Instead of spreading our resource thin over every potential threat, we then focus on those ones that truly matters, the ones that could cause the most damage, who are most likely to be exploited. This isn't just a theoretical exercise, it's a practical tool for making informed decisions about where to allocate your cybersecurity resources. And by understanding such context, you can make smarter choices about what to fix first and to ensure that your defense are strongest where you are most vulnerable. In the next slide, we'll see how Microsoft Defender for Cloud embodies this approach, offering a sophisticated way to evaluate and address the risk in your digital environment based on their context. Microsoft Defender for Cloud stands at the forefront of the cloud native application protection platform, aka CNAPP. It offers comprehensive security across cloud environments. It integrates advanced threat protection, security posture management, and incident response capability, providing an holistic view of an organization cloud security landscape. With its Cloud Security Posture Management (CSPM) framework, Defender for Cloud introduced an innovative risk prioritization feature capability that is available via Defender CSPM plan. This feature isn't just about identifying security issues. is exactly about what I said earlier. It's about understanding. It's about understanding those issues within the unique context of your environment, of your organization. It will take into account various factors like the criticality of the effect of the resource, its exposure level, and more so they can provide a nuanced risk evaluation. This contextualization or this contextualized risk evaluation, believe us, goes behind the traditional severity-based prioritization. By analyzing the specific details of each threat, including how and where they occur, Defender for Cloud will enable the organization to focus on their remediation efforts where they are matter the most. This is a very much a strategic approach that will ensure that resources are allocated efficiently, and with that will be enhancing the whole cybersecurity posture effectively. Basically, by leveraging this advanced risk prioritization, Microsoft Defender for Cloud empowers security teams to not only detect the threats faster, but also understand the truly potential impact in a more meaningful ways. And this will lead to a smarter, more focused response strategy that is obviously critical in today's complex digital landscape. So the framework that we built for this contextualized risk prioritizations analysis is a framework, methodical estimators that will score the risk and that is designed to evaluate the risk more accurately by consider both the likelihood of the threat and its potential impact. Let's consider a scenario where a financial institution is using Defender for Cloud to detect a vulnerability in their online banking system. Unlike the traditional assessment, they might rank this vulnerability as a generic high-risk issue. Defender for Cloud will contextualize and it will evaluate the system and its critical role and how the exposure level is being evaluated. Consequently, it will prioritize this issue by enabling the institution, the financial firm here, to swiftly mitigate the risk before actually an exploitation of such risk could occur. This example underscores how the Defender for Cloud approach to the risk prioritization will help and enable the organization to allocate their security resource more effectively, as I said earlier, ensuring that the most critical vulnerabilities are indeed addressed first. So now let's take a look at some images and how it's done before we actually move into a real demo, live demo. Here, we have right on the top corner, on the left top corner, we have the traditional security score based insights. We're all familiar with Defender for Cloud, CSPM, and security score. We have a score percentage, and we have all the security control exposed in a formal recommendation. And then through each of the security control, we are aware of the number of resources considered unhealthy or healthier. We have additional information visible through here, such as, if the remediation is done, overdue, so on and so forth, right? And the potential score increase if you mitigate it. Below that, on the left here, we have the risk level based insight. This is how we now contextualize such risk, and we evaluate the risk on different factors. Here now, different from the secure score, we see the same security recommendation. Okay, like management ports should be closed on your virtual machine, or machine should have vulnerability finding a result. But guess what? Right now, we have a label on the risk level, critical. So the affected resource, in this case, this machine, is being found on two security risk with a critical level of risk. This critical level risk is formulated and calculated based on different factors. And those factors are labeled right here. We have an exposure to the internet, vulnerabilities and critical resources, as well as sensitive data and lateral movement. Not only that, we now expose the attack path. There are being calculated based on the affected resources, if there is an owner for that resource, and as well if it's the remediation is assigned or not. Talking about critical resources, this is an important factor. Critical resources is something that it is up to you, the customer, the organization, the end user to define. This is the criticality that you are defining based on the business value of such resources. As you define the critical value, the business value on that resource, those resources are going to be tagged as a critical asset. And then such critical assets will take place inside of the calculations of the risk level. So now let's look about the actual calculation. How the calculation is done. How does this framework works? Well, first of all, we have 4 new components in this framework. And then those components are then processed to establish the risk level and their prioritizations. Those components are called the security issues, also known as the SI. Those are basically the potential faults or vulnerabilities in your system, okay, which will increase the risk of successful cyber attacks. So it's basically the security issues that we are also familiar with. But then we have the CI, the contextual information. The contextual information are details about how the issue, the SI, might be exploited, the significance of the compromised resources, and an indicator of a current or past attempts of an attack. Then you take the SI and the contextual informations, which will, and the contextual information enrichment, and we put into something called CSI. It's like, kind of like weird names, right? CSI, CI, CSI now. And then with the CSI, we have the contextual security issue, which is an SI that is now enriched. It is basically further enriched with further insights. And those insights are the contextualized information provided by the CI, which will provide a much clearer picture of the actual risk posed. Now, how we actually calculate? For the calculation, we use the metrics called CSM, Contextual Security Metrics, which is a tool that it is used to quantify the risk based on the security issue and the context. Okay, so the process is the following. We find a security issue and we'll enrich the security issue by incorporating the contextual information. By doing so, we're generating the CSI. Once we have the CSI, then we score the calculation by using the CSM. After the CSM calculates the detailed risk score for each of the CSI, we group those issues by organizing them based on the risk type and the score. And then obviously we detail the results by sorting according to, obviously by default it's the criticality. Highest is the critical all the way to the low. On the left side of this slide, you basically have, a picture showing the SI types and the context type, okay? But then below there is the actual CSM. So what's happening is we have a SI type such as vulnerabilities or internet reachabilities and others, obviously. Each of those CSIs Apologize. Jesus. Each of the CSIs then will be enriched with the context type, with the context information to to generate the CSI, right? And those context types are sensitive data, perhaps, exposure to the public network, provide accessibility, or has sensitive data. Okay, so each one, the CSIs, and each of the context information has a score, has a value. The CSI, I'm sorry, the SI has a base value. Okay, so in this case, we have a resource that has vulnerability. Because the resource has vulnerability, its base score is equivalent of 5. Because we also contextualize such issues with further insights, we discover that these resources also is exposed to the internet, okay, and has access to sensitive data. Therefore, the exposure itself is 3, it has a value of 3 or plus 3 points. The fact that they provide access to sensitive data adds 5 more points. So by adding all together, you get a value of 13, which is the base value of 5 for the vulnerabilities associated with the SI, plus 8, which is the results of 3 plus 5, which are the value associated to the context that were used to enrich the SI. Okay, so this is basically how we do this risk analysis evaluation, and we create the actual results risk level from critical to low or low to critical. Now, we should go ahead and jump into a real live demo. For such, I'm going to move my browser in the sharing windows. And then the very first thing that I want to show you is that in order to leverage the risk level prioritizations, you are required to enable Defender CSPM because it is a built-in capability that comes with the premium version of CSPM, and it is the Defender CSPM. So what you do, you enable Defender CSPM, and of course, to have a full context covered, you want to make sure that all the components of the Defender CSPM are also enabled accordingly. So you want the agentless scanning for machines, Kubernetes, containers. You want the agentless scanning for data discovery, sensitive data discovery, and as well as the KEEM, the permission management, enabled. Okay. By default, that should be enabled. If not, it's because when you enable, probably you don't have the proper permissions. Therefore, you got to act accordingly to elevate your permission or ask someone with elevated permission to do so. Once you do enable, then we'll take about 24 hours to start inventory your resources according to the contextualization of its insights. Within 24 hours, what's going to happen is that you're going to start generating the risk level for each of the security recommendations that are exposed through the standard security assessment that is generated by the default Microsoft Cloud Security benchmark. Okay. Now, one more step. Once you enable Defender CSPM, the next thing that you want to do, you also want to ensure that you have your data sensitivity configured accordingly. By clicking data sensitivity, it should take you to the page where you can select the data type according to your organization's country, region, those kind of stuff. Or you can also set sensitivity label threshold for documentation. Documents are fine. Perhaps here, the minimum sensitive label that I set is confidential. So if I have a document, the label of confidential, it also finds that data as a sensitive data, okay? The second thing that you want to do is ensure that you set the resource criticality. Now, the resource criticality is very important for the risk analysis in this case, because it will allow you, the customer, to define the true business value of their resources. By clicking on it, you're basically going to go to a small document that will basically tell you to open the Microsoft Defender portal, which is basically the compliance, security compliance portal, or the Microsoft Defender portal, the other, the one on the security.microsoft.com. Under the Microsoft Defender portal, there is a section called Microsoft Defender XDR. And under the Microsoft Defender XDR, there is something called critical asset management. Here, you are going to set a rule that will identify and qualify or classify specific resource types or specific resource within a resource type with a different business value. High, very high, medium, low, those kind of stuff, okay? As you can see, there are already 46 predefined classifications, but you can also add your custom classification as you wish, okay? Like there are 18 custom classifications. How do I add a custom classification? It's very easy. You click on create a new classifications, and you just follow the wizard. You give it a name. Oops, sorry. And then once you give it a name or a description, then you have three possible options to select for your query. Is a device, is an identity, or is a cloud of resources? So let's say that's a cloud of resources. I'm going to use a very simple query here. Click on cloud of resources, and then I want to start building the query using the filters. Is a resource types that you want to evaluate, or something based on the resource name, on the resource tag that it contains sensitive data, or some specific category of resource type. Let's say that I want to use resource type. I want to say it's equal to maybe storage. If I find the Microsoft storage here, storage account. Okay, good. So I select what? Didn't take it. Because I got this, sorry, I have to unzoom for a second, otherwise I won't be able. Okay, storage account, apply, and then zoom back in. Okay, so now I have a resource type. I'm looking every storage account, but I want to add specific more, like maybe resource tag. And I'm going to select an operator equal, maybe the tag as something like I don't know, like environment perhaps, okay? And then I'll do productions, okay? So at that point, so I'm going to do, again, I need to unzoom this thing. Let's see. apply. So basically, all the storage accounts in the production environment, plus I can basically contain sensitive data, equal true. So once I apply that, next, it's going to basically see if there are any already resources that can, available. It doesn't matter if there are any or not. Maybe something that it will come, sometime in the future. You're going to assign the criticality, obviously sensitive data in production, very high. Review, submit it, and that rule as a policy basically will take effect in a few hours. Once you do that, then the resource will basically be tagged with the label of critical asset. So all those resources, they are the results of the rule that you set it are also going to be tagged with the critical asset. Now, with the critical asset, then you have the additional factor that will affect the calculation of the score. In this case, I have a database called Ninja's SQL. Its level of a risk is critical. Why it is critical? Number one, because it's exposed to the internet. Two, it uses a weak authentication, meaning in this case, meaning that is using like the SQL authentication other than the what do you call it, the principal, the integrated type of authentication, the one will use the user from the entry ID, right? Also is exposed with the contextual information that includes sensitive data, and also because there is a rule that has defined this type of a resource, in this case, this database, as a critical resources. So those risk factors that were taken in consideration for the calculation generated the level of risk equal to critical. So when you look into the traditional secure score, you do have visibility on resources that are either compliant or non-compliant. Therefore, you're able to know that you have X amount of resources to fix it in order to be healthy and compliant, and then bump the secure score up. But you don't have much visibility into the level of risk each resource exposes and the importance of that resources, and then therefore you are not aware how to prioritize. Obviously, that's to extent, because obviously you might know the server or the instance of that resource type, and you probably can contextualize manually, into some sort of like a model, but it will take time, right? With the actual new model, where you see now, you have a list of all critical resources, and then basically I can go back to the Azure too, and therefore you can start thinking, first of all, I'm going to mitigate it. Those are very critical, but also I know for each one of those, there are number of attack paths that have been evaluated and exposed for these resources. So if I click on it, besides to see some data and traditional information about their resources, if I click on the graph, now I can see in one single view all the attack paths that have been found for their resources as either an entry point or an element of such. Okay, therefore you know that this resource is not only critical, it's been exposed to higher risky level, and then because it could possibly be an element of an attack vector, you want to make sure that this resource is going to be remediated very quickly. And when it comes to remediations, you're also going to be able to see who owns it, if there is an equivalent of tag or something similar to that, and if a remediation has already been assigned or not, and if it's been assigned, if it's in time or overdue. Okay? And with this, I'm actually done with demo. So I'm going to minimize this again, move to the next slide, which opens up the floor for discussions.
Thank you, Giulio. Great information and a few questions that came in that are being answered. I'll go to the top. There was a question at the very beginning when you were talking about the cybersecurity landscape. So the question goes, in traditional security, the concept of using the same lock for all doors is discussed. But how do you incorporate user friendliness into this aspect? We are aware that users often utilize the same password for all locks for easier remembrance and usability.
Yes. So obviously in here, we are not, I mean, with Defender for Cloud, we are not, for the question specifically on the identity and the user password, we are limited in what we can do that because we are not really 100% evaluating the identity per se at its extent, even like, you know, the weakest passwords, all that kind of stuff. Further integration with MDI perhaps will allow you to do that. But if you take another example, perhaps, you know, like a certain, you know, you have resource types that are going to be configured by the end user in the same exactly manner and settings, and those matters and settings are weak. What you can do, guess what? Once you are starting getting familiar with the environment and the status of the environment, the very first thing you do, remediate, obviously, but the remediation is not one-time action. It is a continuous evolving process. And the very second step after the first remediation is to implement the proper governance. You can apply policies. You can apply policies for the user password, like in the example, so that the user use a more complex password, otherwise won't be able to set the password. Same thing for resources that are weak to some vulnerability. You can implement the policy so that resources are not able to be provisioning in such a way that will pose such a vulnerability. Perhaps you want to mitigate all the exposed public exposure to other resources. You can do so with the policies, or you can implement proper conditions into the IAC that will block such provisioning.
Thank you,
Next
Giulio.
slide.
And this was Ken that raised that, or Keen that raised that questions. I have shared some of the links to the blogs for our identity, which is Microsoft Entra, in case you're interested for a
yes, EPM.
Exactly. Yeah. So I have shared a couple, so hopefully this answered your question, and thanks, Giulio, for providing that. Let me just see if we have more questions. Okay. So security teams for large companies may not be able to do data classifications. Can individual subscription teams do this instead?
I don't understand the questions. Enterprise teams do not have a way to do data classifications?
It's the last question, so I'll just read it. Okay, so it looks like Vasavi already replied. So it goes like security teams for large companies may not be able to do data classifications. Okay, so yeah, we're talking about enterprise, and the ask is, can an individual subscription teams do this instead?
I mean, it doesn't really matter if it's the individual team subscriptions or the overall enterprise, as long, I mean, in terms of data classifications, right? As long as you have the proper plan and data classification in this case, right? And component enabled across those environments, than you should be able to do at the small single subscription team or at the large overall organizations, which is obviously the overall group of those subscriptions, if you're talking about Azure. So data classification, if it's it's basically referring to classify if PII or confidential informations, secrets, those kind of thing are available. I mean, are funded, right? If it's so, yes, that can be done either at the smallest element of the overall organization all the way to the entire organization.
Okay, thank you for that. Moving on to the next one. This goes towards the secure score calculation. So the question is, what if one of the calculations they're using, they're okay with and don't want to include in the score like authentication type?
Okay. So currently, the secure score and the risk prioritizations are two distinct types of insights or numeric value, pretty much, if you want to say. One is a truly numeric value, the secure score. The other one is more like a level of sort. We are working right now. So the secure score, you can actually, mitigate that by putting exemptions, right? So what we're doing right now, we are working on integrate the insights gained by analyzing the risk of each of those resources according to the risk factors and the business value, all that, and then enrich the traditional secure score with such new information. Therefore, we're going to have a new version of a secure score, or an improved version of secure score, where their informations are aggregated at that level, and then that will keep the options to obviously exempt, one type of security control from the overall calculation as normally.
Thank you for that. There's a secure scanning question. Vasavi, I see that you replied to that one, but I think the sub question, another one from the anonymous attendee, is related to that. So let me just read it out to Giulio, see if you can answer on this. So if a customer is using a third-party solution on servers, I assume agentless scanning is recommended. But what if the customer doesn't want to wait 24 hours for an analysis? And then the sub question is, it is easy to turn on, but if we don't find it as useful and we would like, is it easy to turn it off?
The agentless scanning, you mean?
I'm guessing that's what this is about.
So if they use a third-party scanner for vulnerabilities, obviously that the results from this third party are good, obviously informations, but then it will not will not be consumed by Defender for Cloud. So yes, agentless, it is highly recommend, regardless if you have an agent-based solutions in place, and it can be Microsoft, agent-based MDVM, or can be any third party, including Qualys, Rapid7, Nessus, wherever it is, right? Doesn't matter. The number one, because agentless allows additional layer of discovery, okay, which are the secret scanning, the malware for if you have the plan for servers, so on and so forth. Enabling the scanner, it is very easy. Once you enable, it is a subscription level enablement. You can enable, and then you're just gonna get the results within, yes, the 24 hours is the markdown for now in terms of, provide the results back to the portal. But the scans are sometimes more than one time, often, they're 2-3 times a day, but yes, the results are 24 hours. It is very invasive, so it doesn't really, it's already included in the plan. So at that point, I don't see why you want to enable or disable it. It's just like one thing that enabling, it doesn't cost you much more than you're already paying for the plan. And it is very much seamless. And then what you do is you're going to get additional information to the traditional scanner. And if you don't have the Microsoft MDVM, you now have information that will enrich the contextualization of such insights with the Defender for Cloud. Yeah.
Thank you for that. The next question is, and I'm not sure if anyone will know, because we're talking about Microsoft Defender for Cloud here, but basically we have Mustafa asking if is the same prioritization risk model is being used for identity secure score and XDR secure score, if anyone knows.
I'm not sure exactly. No, unfortunately, I don't have the answer for that. We can definitely look into maybe, but yes, I'm not sure what they're using.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, Mustafa, if you here, I'll share here at least the blogs for the identity, and you can go through and see if there's anything about the prioritization model or risk prioritization model that we're talking here for MDC. And I see Dick is replying to the last question, which there's more context to the scanning, secure scanning. I think we have completed with all the questions. Folks, am I missing anything? Do you have anything to ask or anything to add? We have a group of SMEs here that are helping us besides Giulio, the presenter. And okay, well, I think we concluded with all the questions. So thank you, Giulio, again for being our guest today and for sharing this great, valuable information with our community. I would also like to thank all of our SMEs who helped answer the questions. And to all the listeners still on the line, if you're someone who wishes to aid us in the protection of the world from cyber threats and desires to have a say in shaping our strategies, blueprints, and recommendations, then please, we invite you to become a part of our security community, because together we think that we believe, in fact, that we can make a global impact. So please join us at aka.ms/security community. This is also where you'll be notified about the upcoming webinars, as well as other events related to the security and announcements as well. And also just to remind you, about roughly a month from today, we'll be connecting again with Giulio as well as Boyan, and talk about again Defender for Cloud Security Posture Management. However, this time we'll be going over the operationalizing and planning part of the Defender CSPM. So please join us for that, and we'll see you in a month from now. Also, please take a minute submitting your feedback at aka.ms/security webinar feedback. For those of you who may have additional questions on the topic that we just covered, or even other product-related questions for Microsoft Defender for Cloud, please feel free to raise them on our Microsoft Tech Community discussion space at aka.ms/MDC community. Thank you all for being part of our community and for joining us on these webinars. We hope to see you next time. Have a good one. Bye.
Bye-bye.